Oh, I'm streaming. Okay. This has actually been a very interesting day. And I'm going to give this just a second here, get over to my YouTube channel, to give the whole world half a second to realize that I am streaming. Looks like there's a message. Yep, and that's me that I'm live streaming. Let's check this. And looks like there's a... Let's mute the audio. Okay, so a few things I'm going to cover today. Yesterday was a bit of a discouraging day. Actually, this morning was too. Because as much as I sing the praises of Open Tunes, it can sure be buggy, and it sure can crash a lot. But I did find some solutions to make it as easy as possible to sort of get through what I've been trying to get through. Now, before I get to that, I want to share something I learned today, which is super cool. I'm going to just bring this screen over here. On YouTube, if you search, let's just try this. Let's try DNS 1111. Look that up. I'm going to recommend that you either Google that or pull it up on YouTube. And what you're going to find is that Cloudflare, in cooperation with I don't remember who, has now offers a free DNS service that you can set on your individual computer, or you can set it on your router. It makes way more sense to set it at the router, frankly. But the idea is that the actual bottleneck in your internet connection is in fact the lookup. It's looking up the web address and matching the name to the IP address. So if you knew the exact IP address of every website you go to, then you would get to it instantly, right? Because you're going straight to that address. But almost everything most people do on the internet involves a DNS lookup. Well, if you go into your router, and I'm not going to explain here how to do it. There's videos on YouTube that do explain it, and there's plenty of information out there. But if you change your router to use the DNS server that's at 1111, and in other words 1.1.1.1, that's the IP address, and then the backup DNS server address is 1.0.0.1, you will then be using, with your entire internet connection in your house or your office or whatever, you'll be using a DNS server that is 28% faster than anybody else. Faster than, I don't know who else does DNS servers. Does Google? I don't know. But everybody else is almost 30% slower than this DNS service. And across the board on all my devices and computers, once I just change the DNS server in my router to 1.1.1.1, all of a sudden every page is coming up like right now. And I've got a 30 megabit up and down connection, so it's not like we have slow internet. Yet this resulted in a palpably faster and better connection. So that was a big deal. I wanted to share that information. So back to OpenTunes. Now there's a few things going on. First of all, let me just show you this. If I go down into the subx sheet, we'll see if OpenTunes cooperates. Okay, you'll notice that the picture just disappeared. Okay, so I have to zoom out here and in here in order to find it. Okay, and there it is. Okay, and if I climb back up out of that, oh, it's gone again. You find out it's over here. Now, why is that? Friends, I don't have a clue. But there it is. That's something OpenTunes has decided to do. Now, it sort of started happening after I had resized the canvas of one of my layers. So is that what caused it? And by the way, I'm going to turn my audio down here. It looks like I'm clipping a little bit. Is that what caused it? Again, I don't have a clue. But it's just one of the many, 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 many bugs I've bumped into. Okay, so now that's one issue. Another issue is I initially started to ink this with vector layers, and what I found with both vectors, and I found this to be true with actually everything, the vectors, the Tunes raster levels and the My Paint brushes. Not so much with the My Paint brushes, but with the regular Tunes levels, I'm going to say 3 out of 10 times when I would go to put my stylus down and make a stroke, OpenTunes would completely forget about pressure sensitivity. And all of a sudden, a delicate line would become a really fat, thick line. Now, I'll try to reproduce that here, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And who knows, you know, the odds are that because I want to reproduce the error, it probably won't happen. I actually had 2 videos I was cranking out earlier today, and I was complaining so much because so many things were going wrong with the software that I just like, I'm not even going to put these videos out because who wants to sit and listen to me complain? So yes, I am complaining a little bit tonight, but I'm presenting solutions to the problems that arose. So anyway, so let's say I set this brush, okay, it's got a range from 1 pixel to 11.42. Okay, so that is not starting at 1 pixel. I did not press hard. Okay, so fail, fail. Oh, there it's working. Okay, it worked. So 2 out of 3 fail. There it's working, 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 working. Okay, and so anyway, and maybe I got my numbers wrong. Maybe it just feels like it's 3 times out of 10 because oh, there it goes again. And what I found was, in most cases, it would fail about 5 times in a row. And then on the 5th or 6th stroke, it would once again kick in pressure sensitivity. Now, somebody out there is going to say, well, wait a second, Dave. What about your tablet driver? You know, maybe that's the issue. Maybe this isn't OpenTunes' fault. Well, yeah, maybe, but consider that I use this tablet with, not only do I use the same tablet with the same driver on 2 different machines, but I use it with Blender, GIMP, MyPaint, Krita, which I obviously complain a lot about. No other application has this issue with pressure sensitivity. So what do? You know, ultimately, I found a workflow that kind of worked, that worked for me, where I simply abandoned pressure sensitivity. And you'll notice many of the ink lines here that are done with a Tunes raster level, the outlines essentially are, this isn't actually a good example, and I'll tell you why in a second, but in the other level, the outlines are basically one or 2 pixels thick. Yeah, so like a lot of this level, the pixel sizes are very uniform. Now that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's not a bad way to go. And of course, you do have the advantage in OpenTunes of being able to go in and, you know, modify the tonality of your ink lines by changing the palette. So that's a win. But it was definitely pretty frustrating. So what I wound up doing was actually, and this would be a better example down here, because the initial lines were drawn with the MyPaint brushes, just like the main pencil. Like, let's see if I can actually, can I get this to work right now? Let me hit the B key. Okay, there it was. So it's just the basic pencil, and I had a real sketchy drawing in there, and what I found was working pretty well as well was something like this, where I'd have my finger on the E key and the B key, and I would just go through the sketch, the pencil test, and just go like this. So I'm just really rapidly just going through and just cleaning up as I go. So that's not a bad way to work, because OpenTunes does do a good job on cleanup. So you can take a level and then in the cleanup settings just hit cleanup, and it will instantly convert levels that were created with my paintbrushes. It'll instantly turn them into a Tunes raster level. It does a very good job of converting them, and then you can go ahead and do your paint work in the normal way. Okay, so let's see here. And again, this is another one of those bugs I'm talking about. It's just kind of maddening. Every time I go in and out of an X sheet, for some reason in this sequence that I'm working on, OpenTunes constantly has to reorient the canvas. So anyway, so this is kind of where it's at right now. Okay, and actually let me set this to the full length of the project so you guys can just see where we're at here. I'll set the stop marker there, and by the way, while that's running, I'll open up Vegas so you guys can see what the current sort of status of the scene is. Got my wonderful martini that I'm and this is probably going to take a while, so I'm going to jump back to OpenTunes and just assume that's going to load up. So okay, so gosh, it did it again. Look, just okay, so this is what happens. He catches the vase, and I need to replace the vase with the CGI version. And then these guys turn around, and the guy finds out that he's got a knife stuck in his back. Okay, so it was kind of fun doing a couple of these little anime effects that you've probably seen before, like the little pulsing of the veins, and then the question mark. So we're kind of using those anime conventions to sort of tell the story. So a little sigh of relief. Won't bail if OBS disconnects. It normally reconnects in a few seconds. Okay. Alright, so we're back on. So that's kind of the state of the project. I'm not sure that I'm totally sold on the quality of the ink lines here. These are literally derived from the My Paintbrush pencil art. And there's anime out there that's the style that they embrace. I mean, anything from Trigger, like Kill la Kill, all the ink lines really look like pencil lines. And I happen to really like that style. If it was up to me, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably have all the eyes in the whole show be like this, just dots. I wouldn't be doing the multicolored, you know, really pretty anime eyes. Just because, nothing wrong with it. It's just not my favorite style, you know. So, okay, but now back here, we can at least now see a preview. Let me make sure I've got this. Okay, yeah, this has the pencil test in there. So you can see how the whole thing unfolds. This brings everything up to date in terms of what the scene's doing. Okay, so Tibetan monastery. If some of you have seen this already, you know, sorry about that. So we've got Akari sleeping here. And by the way, I went in and actually fixed her hair in those two shots. Her hair was... In this scene, her hair just is not to the quality that it needs to be. So that was something that I did have to address, and I did do that today. For the most part, again, with toon raster levels. So he has a little glitch here, and she senses something going on. Come on, let's get going, you know. And so now they're climbing. But she knows something's going on. See, I redid her eyes a couple days ago. And then these guys sneak in. And, uh-oh. And then this is what we have today. Okay, so that really does a pretty good job of showing you where we're at. So, honestly, the last couple of weeks were spent on just this little sequence right here. Because it had the camera move back baked into it. It was fun to do, but it was pretty time consuming. This here, obviously I changed this. I got this wrong. I actually thought this was what it was supposed to be. Shows what I know. It's like, no, it's supposed to be these little things that make it look like there's veins popping out of the side of your head. So I have to plead ignorance. I mean, I have seen that effect, but you know, I'm just doing what I'm told, right? You want to see the veins, the proper veins? I got to show Valerie the veins. Okay, so here's what it looks like now so far. Yeah, see, she's going, yeah, that's right. And the question mark needs to be like it just needs to go and then, instead of blinking, right? Okay. So, anyway, but I mean, it's anime. That's the way it's supposed to look. So, again, these are all my paint brush lines that have been tightened up to serve as essentially suitable ink lines. Okay, so now we're going to stop for a moment and take a couple steps backwards. And by the way, if you're wondering about my martini, this is a extra dirty. OBS has reconnected. So, and if you didn't bail on me, I thank you, because OBS, I got to find a new streaming solution because it just disconnects way too often. Anyway, so when you have these little glitches, like the having to zoom in and zoom out and having it not recognize pressure sensitivity, there's a point you reach where you start to get pragmatic and you say, okay, well, how much time is this really taking me in order to get from this step to this step to this step? Now, put a pin in that for a minute. That's something I'm thinking about. And then I'm thinking about the fact that, honestly, all aspects of this process really need to be broken into pieces anyway. If Blender's the best tool for the pencil test, then fine, do the pencil test in Blender. If I used to say if Krita's the best tool for ink and paint, use Krita, but it's so buggy I can't even get anything done without wanting to claw my own eyeballs out, so I've kind of given up on Krita. But so last night I was really pondering this. I'm pondering the fact that this is really problematic, and I've always done a lot of programming, so I'm like, all right, why don't I look at maybe breaking up this process a little bit more? I'm thinking about GIMP, I'm thinking about Blender, I'm thinking about Python. And I know a lot of programming languages. I mean, I went from Visual Basic to C, C++, Delphi / Pascal. I'm pretty fluent with jQuery, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Haven't done too much with Node.js, although I think it's a cool technology. But I've always kind of avoided Python. And just because I didn't necessarily love it syntactically, and it kind of had a reputation for a long time of being slow. But today, it's like this DNS thing I shared with you. How many people would think that the true reason your internet isn't quite as fast as you think it should be is actually because of the lookup? Not because of bringing in pages, but because of finding and mapping the name to the address. Well, that's how Python is. Python is a slow language in some ways, but at the same time, the speed of your language is almost never the bottleneck in your program. And the most valuable thing is your man hours. How much time are you spending on this stuff? So I decided to step back and think about a different approach. So I'm going to share a different approach here, and we're going to set OpenTunes aside for today. Okay? And we're going to look at some of the other open source tools that are out there that you might want to think about maybe could influence the workflow. Now, this is kind of me talking to myself too, as it always is when I do any live streaming. This is kind of the process I went through. I thought, okay, if I'm going to do, Blender, the entire Blender API is exposed to Python. So you can almost do anything with Python scripting in Blender. Well, the last few versions of GIMP, going back to at least 2.6, have also been thoroughly Python enabled. So I thought, I'm going to look into this. And I found a couple plugins that are just Python scripts for GIMP. So let's start there, that are kind of interesting. So if I go ahead and create a let's go ahead and create a new document. We probably don't want to use too large of a... Okay. So there's this plugin out there called... let me see what it's called. I believe it's called Animation Onion Layers. And you can find this. So I just... all I did was drop the Python script into the GIMP plugins folder. So if you want to know how that works, just go to your GIMP installation. In my case, I use GIMP Portable. So under GIMP Portable, you've got App, GIMP, Lib, which is like library of functionality, GIMP 2.0 plugins. It's a long path, but once you find it, you know where it is. And I just dropped the plugin in here. So there's actually a few plugins I found that I thought were really interesting. One is export layers. The export layers plugins takes any layers that are in GIMP and exports them as an image sequence. Okay, so that's kind of like what My Paint does. My Paint would be a pretty good animation tool for pencil tests if you had a way to isolate layers, like do onion skinning, or well, we won't get into that. But My Paint was written in Python, so I mean, there's something. But anyway, this functionality of the onion skinning, GIMP with onion skinning, GIMP with the ability to export layers as a image sequence, and another one that lets you dynamically resize the brush. I thought this was interesting. So the one that resizes the brush, let me see what it's called just so I can tell you. The tool's called Dynamic Brush Resize. So you can find it online and download it and just drop it in your plugins folder like I just showed you. And then what it does is if I hit the F key, I can dynamically resize my brush, and then I just hit F again, which is the same hotkey you use in Blender. Well, the guy that programmed it did it that way because he liked the way it worked in Blender, you know. So there you go. You know, in GIMP, I can dynamically resize my brush by hitting the F key a couple times. Blah 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 blah. So then I thought, well, maybe I could go even better on this, because in GIMP, by default, in this version of GIMP, at least until I use the two plugins I'm going to show you here, anytime I would click on these brushes, they would go back to their default size, which for me was not really the preferred behavior. I would rather have these brushes default to a size that's sort of a common size that I like to use, let's say. Okay, which for me is usually somewhere between 2 and 5 or 6 pixels, right? Okay, so I'm happy, like this guy, because I can just hit the F key. Wow, let's do that again. I think I gotta, yeah, you gotta hit it twice. So I'm gonna hit it, get it right about there. So I thought, that's pretty cool. Well, let's take a look at this guy's code, I said to myself. What about, I'm thinking I don't really want to have to go F, drag, and then look in the corner here, look right over here, and you'll see that I'm trying to fine tune it to get it right to 2 pixels. And it's like, okay, that's kind of a pain. That's not really working for me. So what I did was I grokked the code of this GIMP plugin, and I figured out the code that was making it work. And well, sort of. I actually had to look into the GIMP Python API to find out what the function was that I really needed to call. But this is what I needed to call, is GIMP context set brush size. 2. For me, what I wanted was I wanted a quick way to set the brush to 2 pixels. Right? And then if I want to hit the F key and make it bigger, fine. But I want to get it back to 2 pixels instantly. So I write this one-line script, drop it in the GIMP plugin folder, and then lo and behold, in the tools, there it is, 2 pixel brush. Amazing. And I assigned that to the tilde key. So now, if I hit the tilde key, boom, instantly I have a 2 pixel brush. That was easy. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Well, what about this other thing I was saying GIMP has? Onion layers. Let's take a look at that. Okay, because I'm thinking I probably won't use this one a ton, because frankly, doing basic pencil tests in like Blender or even OpenTunes is pretty much fine. It's a good way to work. And it's superior to what I would do in GIMP, because GIMP doesn't have the ability to parent layers to each other, and it doesn't have any keyframing, or I should say interpolation capability. However, if you're going to go down this road, you could do a couple things, and I'll show you how this onion skinning thing works. It's kind of interesting. So I'm just going to add a bunch of layers, and I'm going to call them 0, 0. I'll say I'm going to have 5 frames. So I'll just make this easy on myself by numbering them down from 5 to 1. Okay, so 0, 0, 2 and 0, 0, 1. All right. Okay, and then this is an interesting thing about this plugin. If I take a layer and put its name in brackets, it's treated as a background layer. So I thought that's pretty slick. Okay, so now that means we can go over here and say, well, let's draw our ninja guys like we were doing in OpenTunes. So I'm going to draw my ninja guy. Okay, and I'm not going to take a ton of time with this, but I'm going to say here's my guy, and we'll give him kind of a cartoony look. Okay, now with this onion skinning thing, if I hit the period key, it goes to the next layer, but makes the previous layer, you know, almost transparent. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, so we're going to take this, and let's just hit it again. All right. Now I have to say, this is where, like I said, Blender or OpenTunes would be superior, because if you're really going to do a lot of onion skinning, you kind of want to have the, you really want to have the ability to have maybe 2 or 3 past frames, you know, that you can see. This is implemented in such a way where you can only see the last one. I think you can actually see the next one as well. Let me check. Yeah, you can see, because we're on number 5, but it's showing me number 1 again. So. Okay, so if I toggle through them, at least for mapping in my action, we'll go ahead and do kind of work with his shoulder here. My parrot is asking for a potato chip. He always says, "Want a chip? Want a chip?" Because I used to say, and I think Valerie used to say to him, "You want a chip?" Okay, so now this is kind of interesting, because it means that in GIMP, if you want to do some quick and dirty, you know, pencil test work with an application that is not very prone to crashing, frankly, GIMP is your friend. Okay, so now just to be safe, though, since I said that, I'm paranoid now, so I'm going to go ahead and just save this as untitled XCF on my X drive, which is my network RAM drive. Okay, so this is not as interesting as the idea of being able to use GIMP for ink and paint. That's really interesting, because GIMP's way more stable than Krita, way more stable than OpenTunes, frankly, and anything you could want to do that involves painting, you know, that's what GIMP does. You know, it's really a mature product. You know, it's a 20-year-old product. Okay, so let's just block in these frames real quick so that we've got something to talk about. All right. Okay. So no problem. So there's just some keyframes. Okay, so now another interesting plugin, like I mentioned, is this. Export layers. That's interesting, because that means if I have all these keyframes, I can export them as pings, and we've got some advanced feet. Yeah. Okay, I think we're back on. Okay, so with this onion skinning feature in GIMP, if each of these were not single layers but were layer groups, the onion skinning will treat each group as an individual frame. So that means you could have these 5 frames of pencil test, each in a folder with another layer for ink, another layer for paint, another layer for shadows. And the export layers feature was a completely separate plugin, has the ability to merge layer groups, which means it'll take those layer groups, flatten them out, and again, export them as an image sequence. So now if I export these layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it just saved out 5 frames as an image sequence. You know, not too shabby. Now let's say I had created this. Let's go over to Blender now and look at something interesting about this. You say, well, we want to be able to keyframe those frames, stretch them out over time, you know, work out the timing. Okay, here's one way we can do it. This file manager I use, it's called Firestone Image Viewer. I'm just going to go to the X drive here. It's got an interesting feature I discovered the other day. Okay, and here's my frames that I just exported. 1, 2. Let me just preview these. Yeah, some of these are from earlier, so I want to delete the wrong ones. So bear with me for half a second here. Yeah. Delete that. Delete that. Okay, so here's my 5 frames. Now this is an interesting feature of this program, which is freely available. You can go get it. Firestone Image Viewer. I got to remember how to do this, but if I grab a cluster of these images, I think it's under my tools, or create an image strip. Look at that. It created an image strip with a horizontal orientation, and I can create that, and now it's going to save that out as a ping. Okay, so I'm going to call this image strip. This is where it's going to get really interesting. We'll call this image strip, and again, I'm just going to save it on the network RAM drive, which is my X drive. So I'm going to go over to Blender, and now again, as long as we're dealing with Python plugins, let's just have a ball and use Python plugins. So what about this plugin in Blender called Cutout Animation? I don't think it installs with Blender 2.79 natively. I think you have to go get it and add the plugin yourself. But anyway, say let's create a new sprite object with these keyframes that I either maybe created in Blender or created in GIMP or created in OpenTunes, whatever. Okay, I create a sprite object, and then I'm going to import sprites, and I only need one sprite. I'm going to import this one, image strip. Okay. Okay, now that's something I don't like about it, is the way it changed the coloring and stuff. So that's something we have to address, but I don't know if that's a function of Firestone creating the image strip or if that's a function of what got exported out of GIMP. I'm not going to really worry about it right now. The point is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles. Okay. And look what happens when I adjust the frame index. Oh, lo and behold. Okay, that's getting even more interesting. If I come down here and I add a collection, I can actually start to keyframe this. Okay, so now if I want to work out the timing, I want to go here, change the frame index, keyframe it, and by the way, this should be dope sheet so I can see my keys. Alright, change the frame index back here. Alright, go up here. Now I know that when I created these frames, basically the timing was simply not really worked out. So the easiest way to work with it in Blender is to just go ahead and add a keyframe for all 4 of the all 4 of those images, and then just go through here and say, well, okay, let's retime it now. So we'll spread that out. We'll put this, and we'll actually take frame 1 and Shift D to duplicate it and stick that one over here. Okay. And where are we at here? Let's just run this up to frame 40 or so. And when I hit the animate, okay, so it takes the keyframes I created in GIMP, or I could have created elsewhere, and goes ahead and gives me the ability to actually work out the timing with them. So you say, well, that's great, Dave, but that's not very good art. Okay, let's address that, though. Let's address it this way. Let's go back here to GIMP and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. First of all, if I use my onion skin feature with the control key, the way I set up my key mapping, okay, so it actually isolates. It doesn't do onion skins. It literally just shows each individual frame. So I'm going to go to frame 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a folder or a layer group. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a layer over top of that and call it ink. Okay, let's get busy. All right. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and make this kind of dark. And we're actually going to say, let's get the art finished up in GIMP. Now I want to make sure I've got a brush of 2 pixels, so I'm going to use my own Python plugin. Hit the tilde key. And by the way, I'm also going to turn on the stabilizer. I'm going to turn on GIMP stabilizer, which is every bit as good as anybody else's stabilizer. And looky there. Ink time, baby. And all right. So I'm not gonna. And by the way, in the anime, this guy does not have a mask on. He's got everything but a mask, actually. I'm going to turn that back off so I can move a little faster. Okay, so I'm going to go like this. I actually don't need dynamic zooming so much, as long as I can instantly switch from 100% to like 200%. Usually these 3 settings are fine, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to draw this really fast so that I can kind of show what the workflow is here. So this is a skinny ninja. Okay, and we'll give him a little different hair than his counterpart in the real anime. And now I'm hitting the F key to make my eraser bigger. Makes it a little easier to fix that area up. Hitting the P key and the tilde to go back to my desired resolution, and Shift E to just clean that right up right there. Okay, so now I can go ahead and turn my sketch off and say, well, what about paint? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add another level, or layer. I like the word layer better. OpenTunes is the only one who calls them levels. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the fill tool. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where it gets really interesting, because the quality of the ink lines and the quality of the paint look really, really, really good. And not all that persnickety. Now, it might bite me in the butt. I might find out that it's not as wonderful as I'm saying here in a moment, but let's find out. So to do the fill work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select sample merged, and that's going to allow me to fill on a separate level or layer, but respect the lines in the ink layer. Okay, threshold around it seems like around 50 was about right for this. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, so let me actually, I think what I arrived at, come to think of it, for this was to put the ink in the same layer, and then I just have to get my threshold dialed in here. Okay, and like you often have with any program, you're going to have the occasional bleed. Now that looks like it's clean, so I'm thinking at a lower threshold that probably is going to be okay. Yeah. Okay, so now what I want to do is find the sweet spot, and I want to put it in behind mode. Now let me just check this real quick and see if this works. Yeah, that does work. Okay, so I'm going to set the threshold a little higher. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll just go around the horn here and put in the different colors that are important for our character, and I guess for his eyes we'll make them kind of grayish. Okay, now we could also duplicate the ink layer to sort of firm that up. Okay, and then you say, well, what about shadows? Well, before we get to shadows, actually we need to finish this, so I'm going to hit the O key to sample that, hit the fill tool, which in GIMP is Shift B for bucket fill. Okay, it looks like when you switch tools you have to go ahead and sample the color at that point. Is that right? Okay, that's a little annoying. We should be able to sample the color. Okay, and not necessarily the way I'm having to do it, but okay, so we definitely have this fill issue that we want to think about whether that is problematic. Maybe it is and maybe it isn't. I'm not really sure yet. Okay, so let me just check here. Okay, yeah, so we duplicated that, so let's merge that down, and then let's see if we can do any better on our ink lines. What if we fill it here? Actually, go to that color and do it. I said it was in behind mode. That's good, but it's not great. I was thinking that maybe I had my threshold somewhere around 50 when it was looking the best. Yes, I believe that's correct. So yeah, around 50. Because then it seems to, if you're in behind mode, then it stays behind the line, so you can go ahead and ink it on the same layer as your actual ink lines. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and scrap that other paint and do it this way instead. I think I like that better. Okay, so not going to belabor this too long. Okay. Yeah, so this would be, I suppose, the great flaw in this workflow at this point, which I haven't worked with enough to find the workaround, is a little bit of color issues at the edges. So let me turn the, okay. So what about shadows? Let's take this layer, put it up above, but let's put it in darken mode. Okay. So now we're going to take the brush, P for paintbrush, right? P, and I'm going to hit the F key, just make our brush a little bigger. And we want to go with black. And why? Oh, I'm sorry, I had it turned off. I had the layer turned off. I just had a silly mistake. Okay, so as you can see, my shadow respecs my my edges. So by doing it in darken mode, I sort of solved the problem of having to worry about being tight and careful with my shadows, right? So that's the way I always did it in Krita when I was trying to use Krita for okay, by the way, I need to redo this because like a goofball, I did that on the same layer that included my pencil lines, which that doesn't really work so well. So let's just go through here and quickly knock out some shadows on our ninja character dude. So you say, well, wait a second, Dave. I mean, it's kind of cool, but what about this hokiness with your outlines? Well, true, but at the same time, it is kind of easy to fix by just going through and doing a quick touch up. Okay, that got a little aggressive there. Trying to move fast. So, but my point is that this is a pretty respectable ink and paint solution I'm seeing here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I think I can just do that. Okay, and so now if I go ahead and file, export as, grab that strip, and I mean realistically we probably would yeah, we probably would have to do it that way. So we're going to go to Tools. We're going to create an image strip. Okay, yeah, here's the issue. Something about it is we don't want the file name. We don't want to resize it. And I'm not sure what to think about the alpha channel situation. I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and create this and save it just because, but I'm going to go back to GIMP because there's something I'm thinking maybe is going on in the GIMP side that created that. So this is just stuff you have to learn. You sort of have to just learn the workflow. If I'm going to export this as 001 ping, let's just look. Okay. Save background color. I don't want to save color values. I don't think I want to save anything. I guess I'll do that. What I'm curious about is whether the Farstone image viewer is going to see it correctly now. Now it appears to be showing me the alpha channel, because if it wasn't, that would probably be white. Yeah. So I'm thinking let's give that one more crack. Yeah, it's still not cooperating. So that's unfortunate. So that's something I'm gonna have to look at. But you know what? As many bizarre things as I've had to look at with OpenTunes and Krita, this is nothing. This is nothing. So no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And of course, to be fair, there are a number of so what we're going to do here is reload the image. Okay. So that looks like it's kind of sort of working actually. Pre-multiplied. Not sure how we're supposed to be dealing with the alpha. Let's jump back over to here. And we see that it's not showing the alpha, but having dealt with similar things like this in Blender before, okay, J Parks, you were saying use the MyPaint brushes. You're talking about using the MyPaint brushes in GIMP, because I know 2.10 has the MyPaint brushes. I'm not even sure if 2. What is it? 2. I should know this. 2.8. I'm not sure if 2.8 has the MyPaint brushes, but I know that 2.10 does. So anyway, so I mean, it's just kind of interesting. But there's other tools out there, including some that are GIMP Python plugins that will let you create an image strip. So in this case, you know, if I had all of this inked, and if we could make the material respect the alpha channel, I mean, I'm sure we can, but we're going to have to probably jump over here material mode, and we're probably going to have to go, I don't know if we want to do shadeless, but let's go ahead. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm pretty sure if you're in material mode and you go over here and add a texture, and then we're going to use image strip, and we're going to map it to color and alpha, but we need to, you know what that's going to do though, is that's not going to have the frame to frame thing going on, so that will not work. So again, we're kind of in the same boat we always are, where we have some problems that we need to solve, and I'm not going to really try to solve them tonight. But you know, the point here tonight was, as I'm looking at some of the things I've been bumping into in OpenTunes, I'm keeping an open mind, okay, about other solutions that may be, you know, interesting. And being able to write very quickly and easily write a Python plugin for GIMP, I'm like, okay, that's cool. I could totally see, you know, for example, GIMP has the ability to play back the sequence of layers as an animation. And in fact, if you give the layer, like if I were to say 50, I think, if I'm not sure if I have this exactly right, but I believe if I put in parentheses or brackets like 50 milliseconds, when you use the GIMP animation playback, it will actually hold that frame for the number of milliseconds you indicated. You know, stuff like that. That's just kind of interesting. Now, and again, I haven't used this much at all, so I don't know if that's supposed to be in brackets or if it's supposed to be in parentheses. But my point is, the capabilities are there. There are other fish in the sea other than it's just bailed on me again. Oh, I'm reconnected. I think I need a drink of my martini. Extra dirty. Okay. So J Parks, if you're there, tell me, does GIMP 2.8 have the My Paint brushes? I just haven't even looked at that. Or is that a new 2.10 thing? If you're there, let me know. I'm curious. Because I knew 2.10 had the My Paint brushes. I just don't know about 2.8. I was thinking maybe it was a late added feature of 2.8, but I don't know. But certainly in the anime creation process, the hardest thing by far has been ink and paint. Just because of bugginess and because of tools that are half implemented and, you know, don't quite work like they're supposed to work. So that is going to take a minute to load, but I'm going to go ahead and recap tonight by saying, number one, if you want to improve your internet speed, instantly go into your router settings and change your DNS server from automatic, which is what your ISP is giving you, change it to 1.1.1.1. Backup DNS is 1.0.0.1. It'll make your internet way faster. So that was point number one tonight. Point number two was that although I have had some better luck with OpenTunes, mainly working with the Tunes raster brushes, but some bugginess. Look at this bugginess. Every time I go into a sub-X sheet or back out, I have to zoom way out, find the canvas, and zoom back in. Okay? But this scene's coming along. As you can see, it's coming along. These guys are going to turn around and realize that a car is behind them and they're in trouble. So it is looking okay. Not sure I'm happy with those ink lines, but those are my paint brushes, like Jay mentioned. Those are my paint brushes that have been cleaned up in order to be able to do the filling operation. So it's coming along. And as you can see back here, I've redone Akari's eyes. I've actually also redone her hair, but I'll show that another time. And I feel pretty good about the action. I feel good about the final post-production quality. What are you doing? Okay, so I feel like we're on track, but it has been arduously difficult dealing with the bugginess. I complained about Krita's bugginess. Well, guess what? OpenTunes is really buggy too. Crashes a lot. But I will say this: I've only actually lost work one time, and that was because I was just in the midst of drawing and I didn't bother to. Hey, Oxer. I just didn't save often enough, and even though autosave was on, it kind of went bugaboo. So that's kind of the recap for tonight. Change your DNS setting. Google it. Google DNS 1.1.1.1, and you'll learn how to make your internet way faster. And we have 30 up, 30 down. We've got pretty fast internet, fiber optic, and this made a palpable improvement in how quick pages came in. So it's just something to be aware of. The MyPaint and Tunes raster levels seem to be working. I'm not happy with OpenTunes in the sense that when I'm drawing, at least several strokes for every 10 strokes, several of them OpenTunes will not respect pressure sensitivity. It's constantly turning off and on, and no other application does that. Only OpenTunes. So I guess I assume that's an OpenTunes problem. But yet we're still forging ahead and getting things done. So, and then the third thing to recap tonight is I'm boning up on Python so that I can write plugins and scripts to automate certain things in GIMP and maybe ultimately Blender. We'll see. But I think that's it for tonight. How long have I been streaming? Oh, brother, I've been streaming for an hour? Holy cow. All right, so I'm going to sign off, and I'll be back, guys, and we're just going to keep cranking away on this thing. So, good night.